Hello, my name is Thomas. Welcome to British Culture. Albion Never Dies. This is a special bumper-length 1-hour episode about the British-Irish connection. It's a topic I've wanted to do for some time, and you may have heard me recently on the James Bond Club Ireland podcast, where of course I talk about James Bond, but I also talk about my family connection to Ireland. If you subscribe to my newsletter, you'll have had even more details on that, and of course you can subscribe to the newsletter at www.albionneverdies.com. But this is a subject I really wanted to cover in depth, and I've had a few people contact me over the years saying that at Christmas people really appreciate the extra length because they're driving long distances, they're taking long flights to see family, and this is just a really good time to have that extra length in a podcast. So I am enormously indebted for this one to Garvan Rushe, who runs Dublin Tour Guide. He joins me with his expertise, more than 15 years of guiding experience. He specialises in creating made-to-measure tours for small groups, shaping each individual experience around what those guests truly care about. He answers a number of my questions about British and Irish culture, and I hope you enjoy it. There's no sign-off at the end. I leave the final word to Garvan, who, as I say, is a wonderful guest, and you can find him over at DublinTourGuide.ie. Again, we cover those details at the end. Enjoy. Okay, Garvan, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thanks, Thomas. Great to be here.
And you are one of the private tour guides for DublinTourGuide.ie, is that right?
And that's right, yes. I started tour guiding in Dublin in 2009, and then in 2012 set up the company, and now we have 9 guides as well as myself. I'm kind of like the backup guide. Come the high season when we're booked fully, I'm there in case a guy gets sick or we get a last-minute request that comes in. Don't use that as a technique, any listeners, to get the owner of the company as the tour guide. Okay? Probably should have said that now. But yes, we do tours around Dublin, private walking tours. We like to keep it small, so we don't do any public tours or shared group tours. Because we like to keep it cohesive, and we like to be able to make it bespoke depending on the people themselves. So, people like to go with their own pace, they like to ask their own questions, and they want their own experience of the city rather than something that's been manufactured and optimized to please as many people as possible. We want to please as few people as possible. No, we want to please those few people that are on the tour rather than everybody else. So,
and you've mentioned that when people, you mentioned off mic that when people come to Dublin, like, it's intentional, right? You are specifically visiting Dublin.
Yeah, I mean, you do notice when you get here, you haven't walked from another country. You have taken a flight typically. But it's also, I suppose, when people from different continents come to visit the European continents, they do a modern version of the old classic European tour, where they'll do, Paris and Florence and Rome, and maybe they'll get up to Berlin, and then they'll skip over to London, right? Mm-hmm. That's kind of the gist of it. So first-time European visitors will do something along those lines. And it's only probably your second or third visit to Europe will you visit Ireland. So, for those that don't have explicit Irish heritage, that's probably most typical for them. Obviously, those with Irish heritage will probably look to go to Europe to go to Ireland as their principal destination. So I was listening to a podcast about Orson Welles, and when he was 16, he took the boat from the States to come over to Europe. And somehow, funnily enough, the first stop was Ireland. So he just stayed in Ireland, and he was like, the west of Ireland, this is the romantic Europe that he was looking for. Obviously, this is, at the start of the 20th century, start of the 1900s. So he got his first acting role in Dublin in the Gate Theatre, which is still going today. at the age of 16. And well, I'm not going to tell you the rest of the history of his life, but it's interesting that he felt enough fulfillment and satisfaction in Ireland, at least in terms of the romantic aspect of it, to stay in Ireland and not feel the need to venture into what you and I would call Europe proper, right?
Yeah.
Continental Europe. Yes. Yeah. But Ireland's a great destination because it doesn't get those hordes and throngs of tourists that come to, let's say, Paris every summer, right? Buses and buses of them. Because as I said, that bus would need to take a ferry to London and then, or sorry, to England, and then a ferry from Wales over to Ireland. So it's a bit trickier to get over here. And I'd say that's a good thing as well, because we want people coming to Ireland with intent. We want them to come here because, as you said, they've chosen to come to Ireland rather than just, oh, what country are we in now? Luxembourg. Yeah. Where is that? Let me look that up on the map,
And I like that you refer to, Ireland's rich kind of cultural heritage.
Well, that's the main thing. I mean, when we're doing the tours, it's really Dublin is the platform through which I explain Irish history and culture. So the buildings, the streets are there as, I suppose, a segue or an excuse to talk about an aspect of Irish culture and history. Because what is a building without the people, right? If you're talking about a building and you're not mentioning the people, well, you're actually talking about a ruin. You're talking about a building that just exists itself in isolation. So what a city means to the world is determined by what it means to the people that inhabit that city and who engage with that building, and how that changes over time, over the generations. And I'm actually reminded of Dublin Castle, which is one of the attractions to see in Dublin, of course. Now, castles, you think castle, you think something pretty epic. Dublin Castle is not that. It's visually not as impressive as many of the other castles in Ireland. But it's the most important castle because it was the centre of British control in Ireland for over 700 years. So it has got this incredibly wide duration of history to it that is unfathomable for even me. And I've said 700 years over 700 times, probably multiplied by 20 again, That castle had this Mordor-esque, I suppose, veil to it, right? That's how it was seen for most of those centuries, from an Irish perspective, of course. And then in 1922, we get independence, and the view of Dublin Castle starts to change, whether it was done intentionally by the state, the authorities, or inadvertently. Regardless, today it's got a very different image. It's a much brighter and colorful place as far as Irish people are concerned, because of what has happened there over the last 50 to 100 years. Namely, the president is inaugurated there. Obviously, having the president is kind of proof to the world that we're a fully independent republic. Obviously we're often confused as being part of the UK. That's something that it's a different country. And then we get the question, what's the deal with Northern Ireland? And then we have to explain that a little bit as well. So, we're not even in the Commonwealth. And it's interesting for Americans and Canadians and whoever else to hear that politically Ireland is farther away from the UK than Australia and Canada are. And that their head of state officially is still King Charles, right? So you have that aspect of the castle, and you also have the aspect where referendum results have been announced there. And there was a big one in 2015. We were the first country in the world that brought in gay marriage through a civil referendum rather than just through the courts. And so you can imagine that that inner courtyard was a place of jubilation and celebration for so many people who had suffered under what was pretty much a Catholic state for most of the 20th century.
Mm.
And now we've gone from being, very Catholic and dogmatically so, to very, very liberal, very, very progressive, and a place, ironically, where most people who were born and raised Catholic don't regard themselves as Catholic anymore, or they have it down, but in their hearts they might feel they're 5% Catholic,
Mm.
and their other religions they're 0%. If you know what I mean. Does that make sense?
It's
Now
very
that's a
interesting
sweeping
because
generalization, but for most of Irish people, they would ascribe and align with that, more often than not.
and that's an interesting point about how culture changes, right? Because a lot of, let's say, overseas Irish, people who might never have been to Ireland themselves, will strongly identify as Irish Catholic as opposed to generic Catholic.
Yeah, well, that's a good topic. That's one that I touch when it's brought up. So, what you had in Ireland from the 1500s onwards was the introduction of another division or difference between what we would call the Irish and the English or the British, depends on the century, as you know,
Hmm.
and that was religion. Right, there were different in many ways in the 1500s, right? Language, dress, laws, politics, etc. But they were all Catholic.
Mm.
Now the schism, the Reformation had happened, and by the 1800s, and that became the major difference between your identity as Irish on the island of Ireland or your identity as British on the island of Ireland. So whether you were Protestant or Catholic was really a marker of that identity. And that's one thing that a lot of people don't understand, and it's not their fault because newspapers, media have framed it as simply as Catholic versus Protestant.
Mm.
But essentially, if you're talking about most of the 19th and 20th centuries, Catholicism is a marker or a symptom of your Irish identity, and Protestantism a symbol or a marker of your um, British identity or affiliations
Mm.
on the island of Ireland. So that's why your Irishness circa 1920 or 1890 or 1950 was determined by how Catholic you were,
Yeah.
rather than any of the other Irish traits that, of course, would have been much older than the schism between Catholics and Protestants. So, of course, going over to America, this is why they were referred to as Irish Catholic, whereas the Italians were not called Italian Catholic,
Mm.
right? The Polish were not called Polish Catholic. And that hyphenated word, Irish Catholic, is, I suppose, a reminder of that period of history when Catholicism was such a defining aspect of Irish identity and is no longer. Now,
Yeah.
I can go into you've got a couple of hours just to talk about that, but I'll put a pin in it for
Fair
now.
enough. And worth adding, it doesn't necessarily mean their political views match their confessional identity. In that I've met Catholics who don't necessarily follow Catholic politics in Ireland, and I've met Protestants
Oh,
from Ireland
yes.
who don't necessarily follow what we'd say in shorthand is the Protestant point of view, right? There's great diversity of thought on both sides.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And more so now than before because
Mm.
there's less of an us and them mentality that used to require that sort of group affiliation.
Yeah, and you mentioned, there's a difference in passport, right? That you could be from Ireland and have a different passport. I have met somebody from the Republic who uses his UK passport, to which he was entitled whilst working overseas for visa convenience, and the same the other way around. So we ended up with a group of Irish people in our office, none of whom their passports matched exactly what we thought they would match when they turned up.
Yes, yeah. It's a good passport to have. Well, both UK and our Irish passport are strong ones to
Mm.
have. It's funny, after Brexit, there were reports that loyalists from Northern Ireland, whose Britishness is not in question,
Mm.
and that meant that they're 120% British, which meant that
More
they were
British than the
negative
British is how
20%,
they'd be viewed here.
more British than most people in England, for sure. And yet they were getting Irish passports, which is quite funny. But it's because, and in case people don't know that, if you're born in Northern Ireland, thanks to the Good Friday Agreement of 1998, you are entitled to regard yourself as Irish or British or both, and
Mm.
therefore have both passports, an Irish
Yeah.
passport and a British passport. So Northern Ireland it benefits in some ways from being on the threshold. It has the best of both worlds, but there's a lot of reasons why it doesn't seem like they're taking advantage of the best of both worlds
Mm.
situation. But that's another topic for a couple hours.
Yes, yes. I think one topic we said we'd talk about is if I were to come to Dublin for a day, what would you show me?
Yes. So, well, Dublin Castle is up there, right?
Yeah.
You got to understand the history and the weight of that place. But people already are aware of that.
Mm.
Dublin Castle, they've heard, of course, Guinness, right? Guinness is becoming more popular now,
Yes.
thanks to Guinness Zero, thanks to House of Guinness, this new show. And Guinness is a great beer. So a lot of people feel that if they come to Dublin, that they have to visit the Guinness Brewery, the Guinness Storehouse.
Mm.
I will say that if you don't drink, you do not need to go there. Part of the magic of going there is having a delicious pint of Guinness at the top of this kind of rooftop bar where you have a great view of Dublin. And it's, you learn a lot about Guinness. It's a great story. You also do feel like you're, in an advertisement, right?
Yeah.
Because, you're going to like Guinness more after going there. But if you don't drink,
Mm.
it's not going to make much of a difference to you. But that's been rated, I think it was in 2024, it got the accolade of best tourist attraction in the world.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they've been working hard to make it a great experience for as many people as possible.
Mhm.
So that's always there. But I don't want to tell you about the attractions that you're going to find with a quick Google search or a clickbait page on 10 things you must see in Dublin.
Yeah.
I want to tell you about the undervisited stuff, the attractions that people aren't aware of, and partly that's because you either need to know a lot of history as background, or they don't have an advertising budget because they're free, right? So they find it difficult to compete with attractions like this. So one of them is the GPO, the General Post Office, and that's it is a post office, still a working post office, but that was used as the headquarters for the rebels during the 1916 Easter Rising. And 1916, I like to say to Americans, is our 1776.
Mm.
So typically, you understand what that means. So that's a pretty important building. They have a museum there as well to tell the story of the 1916 rebellion, the background, the context. And, all of this is going on during the First World War. So there's a lot of interesting conversations happening about Irish soldiers going off to fight for Britain or staying at home and trying to get guns from the Germans. So it's an interesting museum indeed.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then another attraction that I love is the National Gallery and the National Museum. So the National Gallery, Ireland is not the Netherlands. It's not Italy, right? It's not France or Spain. It doesn't have this great tradition of fine art creation. It doesn't have that heritage. But this gallery, thankfully, has gotten its hands on quite a few interesting pieces. And I'm just looking at what's behind you there, Thomas, and it's almost like a Turner
I do
Is
have a
it?
postcard of a Turner someone sent to me. Yes, yes, I believe a friend
Yeah.
Liam Mather, I think. Yes, so my friend Liam sent this to me from the US. Yes.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, yeah, great. So I don't know if we have any Turners, but there's Picasso, Rembrandt, Renoir, Caravaggio. So there's big names from here in the Irish gallery, as well as some Irish art as well. So
Mm.
that's a half day in there, and it's free. So great to go in there, and if you can just see the highlights, so you don't get exhausted. And then the museum, it's called the National Museum of Archaeology and History, and that is phenomenal. Again, it's huge. It's akin to the British Museum, where if you go in without a plan, then you're going to need several coffee stops. And I still remember it's the only cafe I've seen where they had espresso, double espresso, triple espresso. And I'm
Wow.
like, yeah, I guess you would need that because after you've had your first coffee stop and then you're going back for more, you're going to need a triple espresso the next time. So it's not as big as the British Museum, but the Archaeology Museum
Mm.
is still too big to handle in one visit. So I recommend restricting yourself to the Kingship and Sacrifice exhibition and the Treasury exhibition.
Mm.
So the former has what's known as the bog bodies, which are very intriguing. They were discovered in 2003, two bodies found separately, and they were so well preserved by the bog, which for our non-Irish and British listeners is a mire. In fact, the English term is mire, and but most of the world just uses the Irish word bog, which means soft, because that's indeed what a moor or a mire is, a load of soft ground. But the bog is quite acidic. The soil is quite acidic, so most bacteria can't survive on it. And because it's saturated in water, oxygen can't come in easily either. So kind of acts a bit like a fridge. So it preserves things, objects that are kept in the bog. And when the bodies were discovered in 2003, apparently they called the police because they thought that they had been murdered maybe 40 years ago.
Mm.
And yet the post-mortem was carried out, and I imagine it was dramatic scenes from a movie where there's somebody there with a microscope, and he's like, "No, I can't be. I have to take another look at this." So it was revealed that they were over 2,200 years old,
Mm.
um, and one of them still has his hair. You can see the skin. You can see the fingernails. Even the meat that he was eating for his last meal is underneath his fingernails.
Gosh.
Um, so yeah, that's remarkable, intriguing, and well, it's great to bring kids if they're old enough to not get nightmares by seeing those dead bodies. So that's the Kingship and Sacrifice, and then the other one is the Treasury, which hosts some of the best pieces of art um, in Ireland. So the Tara brooch chalice, these are very famous pieces. These could be regarded as, let's say, number two, number three of the most important objects in Ireland.
Mm.
Number one would be the Book of Kells, and that's a huge visitor attraction at Trinity College. So Trinity has this beautiful library called the Old Library, and it's quite a spectacle. Now, as of our conversation here in November 2025, the library is mostly empty of books.
Oh.
But this is kind of part of their preparation to close it down, refurbish it, and then reopen it. So they're going to close the library finally, I've heard, in 2027, then hopefully take no more than 3 years to refurbish it, reopen it, and then fingers crossed they'll bring back the 200,000 volumes that were
Wow.
previously on the shelves.
I mean, whilst we're on that topic, it's an obscure reach, I know, but lots and lots of people have seen it without realizing it because it was the model for the Jedi library in Star Wars Episode 2: Attack of the Clones. It is that library in essence.
Well done, Thomas. That's right. Yeah. How did you know that? Where did you learn that?
Oh, that comes from being a massive Star Wars fan. So,
Good. So I mean, that's maybe your number one reason for coming over to Dublin to see the
I
Jedi
need to
Library.
see the Jedi library.
So it is uncanny how similar it is. Legend has it that Lucas came in, snapped a few photos of the library, and then eventually digitally rendered it without informing the library.
Mm.
So Trinity College were, some official was watching it, and then it's like, wait, that looks familiar. The scale is a bit bigger, but those are the podiums for the busts, and that is it's very similar.
Yeah.
It is very similar.
But of
But
course,
that's,
Star Wars
I
is
guess,
set
a
a
testament.
long time ago. So really, it could be that the Dublin Library copied the Jedi Temple.
There we go. Yeah. It's always a very confusing chronology for people to get, even though those are the first few words, right, that they read. But I mean, that's a testament just how beautiful a library it
Yes,
is.
it's a very, very beautiful one. Yeah.
It is quite breathtaking, and not in an in-your-face, gaudy, over ornate sort of way. So it does it in kind of a more, I wouldn't say subdued, but it's just not over the top. It's done well. So that's Trinity College. We talked about the gallery, the National Museum of Archaeology and History, a little bit about Guinness. The Jameson distillery is also there. There's a few other distilleries to visit as well. But if someone were to say, I don't want to spend the whole time drinking alcohol, what is the one alcohol attraction that's a good one to visit? So I would punt on the Irish Whiskey Museum.
Okay.
So they are based very close to Trinity College, and unlike the other ones I've mentioned, are a bit of a walk away. And it's not tied to any particular brand, and they give you a good idea of how whiskey is made, but also the business of whiskey circa the year 1750 or whatever year they've chosen, kind of whatever is the height of Irish whiskey production and success. So that's an interesting one. And then Epic Museum. This is just a little over 5 years old. What's it coming up to? Yeah, it's a good few years more than that. But it's the story of Irish emigration. And I think anyone coming from any country in the world could find some Irish connection there, because the US's story is a story of immigration, and Ireland's has been a story of emigration, people leaving Ireland, particularly from the Great Famine in the 1840s, but even before that.
Mm.
So you can learn about the Irish, fighting in various um, wars and armies throughout Europe over the centuries. And Bernardo O'Higgins is regarded as the forefather of Chile. So he's responsible for Chilean independence with a name like Bernardo O'Higgins. So you could see the Irish ancestry there. The father of the Argentinian Navy was an Irishman called Brown. So it's got plenty of these stories. And, it's funny. There's an interesting statistic that seems counterintuitive, but there are more people in England with Irish grandparents than there are people in Ireland with Irish grandparents.
Yeah. Yeah,
Right.
I
Now,
can.
I have four of them. You might have one of them, Thomas.
Aha, yes. Well, you're mentioning of Irish people going abroad to fight. So the Spanish king, of course, had a regiment of Irishmen fighting for him. And that's where my forebears left to go and join that.
Oh, really? Right.
They were very well dressed. There's a whole Sharp episode just about them, I think mainly because of that.
Very good. Yeah. There were brigades in the Prussian army and obviously the French. I think in the 1600s, the warrior class was allowed to leave after being defeated, and a lot of them went to France and Spain. And with the whole Catholicism thing, and the whole rowdy Irish thing, the British authorities regarded the Irish as just too unreliable to have as soldiers. And circa 1800, they're like, listen, we're losing all these great men to Spanish and French armies. We should take them. And so that's pretty much when the Irish regiments in the British Army were created.
I think I've got Lawrence James's The Rise and Fall of the British Empire behind me, which said at the height of the British Empire, the majority of the British army was Irish and Scots. It was minority English.
It's interesting, isn't it? Yeah.
My family were Irish and joined the British Army and various others. We've got a Bible here that goes back to 1825, and it has the notes of all of them joining the army, going to India, and so on and so on. Not a unique story, I think, my family history. It's quite common.
Yeah, it's I mean it's fascinating. It's where they all ended up. I think there was something like, just to kind of follow along the same line as your comment, was that there were more Irish officers in India than there were English officers in India at a time anyway. So yeah, it's an interesting part of the history. So you could learn a good bit about that at that Epic Museum that I mentioned. So that's an interesting visit. I think when people are coming to Dublin, a couple things to be aware of. It is a bit like a small London. Nearly everywhere is walkable. It's flat. It's compact. So you don't need to be taking public transport to get from here to there. Typically, only Jameson and Guinness are not in the city centre proper.
Okay.
And walking from one edge of the city centre proper to the other would take you less than 20 minutes.
Okay.
So it's great how close everything is. Even on a 5-hour walking tour with me, we actually don't cover a lot of ground physically, because City Hall is right beside Dublin Castle, and it's a stone's throw from Christchurch Cathedral, and at the bottom of that street is the river, and that's a very short street. So there are not that many hills. It's easy to navigate, and then when you're planning your itineraries in Dublin, just remember, okay, we're going to do 2 or 3 attractions, rank them by difficulty level, and start with the most difficult one. You do not want to do Guinness first and then go to the National Museum. That's that. You're going to go sleepy time pretty soon after that. So if Guinness and any of those other alcohol attractions are on the list, have that as your reward for being a good boy, right? Being a good student throughout the day. So I'd say National Museum is maybe 5 out of 5 difficulty level. The Epic Museum would be more so a 3 out of 5. And then Guinness is a 1 or a 2. Maybe more of a 2, because there's a little bit of walking, there's a little bit of reading involved. It's not a roller coaster. Of course, if you're like my wife, then a roller coaster is difficulty level 6 out of 5. It just cannot handle that. Whereas for me, it would be a 1. Yes.
I just add in, for my wife and I, it's the other way around. Like, she grew up with Six Flags California. That was her thing. I grew up in countries which don't have them. So I tried them the first time when I was already quite middle-aged. And it's quite a surreal experience to be on a roller coaster for the first time when you're just that bit older.
You're surrounded by screaming kids who are having like 10 times a better time than you are.
Yeah, and I'm like, I understand it's exciting, but I've done Middle Eastern traffic,
Well, that's actually seriously dangerous, can be, yeah. And then, like, if you're coming to Dublin, Dublin is, a city that you could easily spend 3 nights in Dublin, right? There's plenty of things to do. Of course, if you're bothering to take a flight to Dublin, you might feel compelled to explore the rest of the countryside. So what we find typically, those coming from other continents do, is they will take a day trip to the other end of the country. So they'll go from Dublin, which if anyone cannot get to Google Maps right now, if you look at your left hand and look at the right side, just below your pinky finger, and pretty much where that first crinkle or line is on your hand, that's where Dublin is. So Dublin's on the coast, right? People are going from there to the other side of the hand, right? They're going to the west of Ireland and back again in one day, and it's just a long day. Better to go over to Galway and spend a night in Galway, or if you want to go to the cliffs, sorry, that's the Cliffs of Moher. If you want to go up to the Giant's Causeway and the Titanic Museum, that's up near Belfast, best to spend a night in Belfast or somewhere near there rather than do a 12, 13-hour day trip to there and back again. It's just exhausting. So that's a little bit of advice for how to plan a trip to Ireland with obviously arrival and departure from Dublin. Or you could fly into Shannon Airport in the west, and that gets you to the west. So fly in of one and fly out of the other is probably the best idea, just to be more efficient with your travels.
And am I right? Tipperary is right in the middle, just that one last place.
Yeah, like if you're picturing it, it's just a bit southwest of the middle. Yeah, there you go. Is that where the family are from?
Oh, it's a famous place for the garrison there, right? For the soldiers going through. So there's the song, "It's a long way to Tipperary," and that's why it gets into the song. It's not convenient for anyone.
I thought it would be something like that. Yeah, it was made up by a British soldier who had no connection to Tipperary. He just liked the rhythm of the word.
Yeah.
Tipperary, right?
That's right. Yeah. So from Galway to Tipperary, it is a bit of a long way. Taking the transport at the time.
Oh yeah.
I met someone recently who's from Tipperary, and never in his life until he came to England had he had so many people reference that song.
Yeah, well, in Tipperary, they don't. It's not like they talk about it every day. They're already there.
Fair enough. I lived in Turkey for 7 years, and until I went to China, I didn't know that one of the most popular songs in China was about hot air balloons in Turkey. So it was almost guaranteed. If I mentioned Turkey, they'd be like, hot air balloons. I'm like, it's not really a big thing, really, but it's a big song in China.
Is it a Cappadocia thing?
Yeah.
I picture Cappadocia and the hot air balloons.
So obviously people fly in as tourists, but it's not like people living in Turkey are doing this all the time. You don't go to school by hot air balloon.
Yeah, it's great, those songs. In the west of Ireland, in County Galway, to the west, in West County Galway, there's an area called Connemara, and that's very popular with French tourists because of the song called "The Lakes of Connemara" from maybe the early 70s. And so, generations of French people are looking forward to going there. They want to go there because of the song. And on that note, on a more modern note, Grafton Street is mentioned in modern pop music. Ed Sheeran sings about it, right? And Galway Girl, right? So this has been good for Irish tourism to get the younger generations here. Whereas I think you and I would be old souls. I remember I was kind of lamenting the passing of Charles Aznavour, who is a Armenian French singer, so mostly known as a French singer, whose heyday was like 50s, 60s, 70s. And I was like, this is world news. This is very important. He wrote that song "She," and he did it in several languages, and it was a huge hit, and a few other things as well. So yeah, we're old souls, the two of us.
Absolutely, but there's one young thing that I'm very, very interested in. I think I mentioned it off mic, which is Paddington 2.
Oh, yes. Well, I mean, that's going to be a classic for at least 400 years.
Absolutely, and partly filmed in Dublin, outside Dublin, for the prison.
Oh, I don't know what the scenes are. Yeah.
Oh, right. No, so the prison that was also used for the Italian job.
So that's that thanks for bringing us back. Kilmainham Jail. So that's Kilmain, N for November, HAM, Kilmainham. And so Kilmainham Jail is, yes, indeed, where those movies are filmed. In the Name of the Father was also filmed there. It's a jail from 1796, and it operated from then until the 1920s. So it saw a lot of action, and pretty much the entire pantheon of Irish heroes were interred there at some stage or another.
Hmm.
So the 1798 rebellion, 1848, 1867, 1916, then the War of Independence, and then the Civil War right after it, 1922, 1923. People were interred, indeed executed there. And my great grand uncle, Sean McDiarmid, was one of the leaders of the 1916 Easter Rising. He was the second name on the proclamation that was read out at the
Wow.
post office, at the GPO, on Easter Monday, 1916. And I was there 100 years to the day for the commemoration of the centenary of
Mm.
1916. So it's a very powerful place for me, but that feeling, you could ascribe that to really every Irish person.
Mm.
And this is why the jail is very popular.
Yeah.
It is thankfully booked out and well deserved. It's a
Hmm.
great visit, but if you are going to visit it, do a bit of research on the names, at least the names that are associated with the 1916 rebellion, in particular that rebellion,
Yeah.
because the tour is great, the guides are great, but for an uninitiated person, so someone that doesn't have familiarity with Irish history,
Mm.
there's going to be a lot of names thrown at you, and they're
Yeah.
going to go over your head. So if you are going there, if you do manage to get tickets, if you don't manage to get tickets, just on the day, be on the website 9:15 in the morning, and that's when they release more tickets.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
shouldn't have told people that, but that's the little trick that you could use if you don't manage to get a slot in advance, because it can be booked up for weeks,
Okay.
especially during the high season.
Yeah.
And then in the low season, there'd be a lot of school groups going there, justifiably so.
Mm. Yeah. That's very, very interesting. And also interesting, often we know of a place because it's in a movie, but there's often so much more to it. There's a good reason why they're using it.
Yeah, I mean, it is a spectacle. It's quite remarkable.
Mm.
And then, there's a few places that are filmed in Dublin. I think, I mentioned the romantic view of the French going to Connemara, but I might get the date wrong, but circa 2005 or so, there was a movie called P.S. I Love You, and that was
Mm.
filmed in Dublin. And at the time, shortly thereafter, you had I won't say throngs, but you had a lot of American and English girls in their 20s coming to Dublin to meet their future Irish husbands. Right.
Okay.
Yeah. And
Okay.
we're still here waiting for you, girls.
Fantastic. How media influences us all in some way.
Yeah.
And you also have mentioned to me that an early spy writer has an interesting Dublin connection, The Riddle of the Sands.
Yeah, so this is what was it, 1903 was when it was published. So Erskine Childers was one of he was involved in the revolutionary movement for Irish independence. He was one of those that actually was involved in the negotiations to end the War of Independence.
Mm.
So these negotiations that took place between the Irish delegates and huge figures like Churchill and the then Welsh Prime Minister of Britain. Who was that?
David Lloyd George.
There we go. Yeah. I wonder how many Welsh prime ministers there have been, actually.
Not many.
Yeah,
Not
that's a
many.
safe answer, right? So,
As in,
Erskine
you have to
Childers.
go further back in our history rather than closer to us.
Okay, so potentially circa 1710 or something
Yeah.
like that. Right.
Yeah.
So Erskine Childers, he was involved in that and in the treaty negotiations. He took the side shortly thereafter of the anti-treaty side.
Hmm.
Um, and the anti-treaty side, just since we're talking about it, um, the terms IRA or the term IRA has different incarnations and a different, let's say, public image, depending on who's looking and what decade it is.
Mm.
So Circa 1920, the IRA is led by Michael Collins, and they're the ones that pressure and finally kind of a bit of outsmarting, but basically force the British to come to the table,
Mm.
essentially. So that's what we would call the good IRA,
Yeah.
right? Then you had the treaty negotiations, and then the main contingent of the IRA, so to speak, became the anti-treaty forces.
Mm.
And they lost the Civil War, but they didn't want to give up. So they kind of went underground, they continued, and they became the new version of the IRA. And then, of course, they resurfaced in Northern Ireland at the end of the 1960s. And then you have kind of a different IRA.
Mm.
And then there's splinter groups as the 70s and the 80s roll on, and they have different policies and are viewed differently, of course, from an English side and from an Irish side. They're viewed
Mm.
differently. And then pretty much by circa the mid 90s, the late 90s, they have universal condemnation for most Irish people.
Mm.
Quite different from circa 1970, where they had,
Yeah.
and I'm generalizing here, because 1970 was a very different time. Anyway, we won't get into Northern Ireland more than that, but it's just interesting to see the genesis of where the IRA comes from. So
Certainly.
Erskine Childers, he was executed by the Irish Free State Army in Dublin, not in that jail, but in an army barracks. And then his son went on to, when he was 16 when his father was executed. His son, also called Erskine Childers, because it's an unusual name, and why not keep it? You don't want to be called, John, John Childers, and it's called Erskine, right? So Erskine the second, he went on, played a part in Irish politics, and ended up becoming the president of the country for a while in the 1970s.
Mm.
So it's a good name, it's a popular name, and it's going to be easy to remember because there's two of them. Once you see
when
it
you Google
spelled,
them,
you'll get it.
When you Google them, it's important to get the right one for what you want.
Yes. So it's the first one, to come back to your question, who was the author, and he wrote that spy novel. And well, since we're talking about spy novels or movies and scenes in Dublin, Smithfield Square in Dublin was used as the scene for the movie where the spy who came out of the cold.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Is that the right title?
The Spy Who Came In from the Cold, John le
That's
Carre novel, and then Richard Burton was the star of the movie. Yeah.
Yeah, so Checkpoint Charlie was the scene. So Smithfield in Dublin
Yeah.
was Checkpoint Charlie in Berlin. So
I have been through Checkpoint Charlie when I was a kid because my family was stationed in Berlin, and we had a pass. So I've been through Checkpoint Alpha, Bravo, and Charlie. Confirm the film is all right as a double.
yeah, well, it's just because Smithfield had then, and thankfully still has, the cobblestones or these great looking sets, which are great, but they're not so great when it's slippy, when it's wet.
No,
but they look fantastic still.
Yeah, that's, thank goodness it so rarely rains in Britain and Ireland because we've got cobbles everywhere.
Well, it's actually Dublin is Dublin is the driest part of Ireland.
Okay.
Unless you include the biggest lake in Ireland and Britain, which is Lough Neagh in Northern Ireland. That's technically the driest. In other words, it rains the least there. But isn't it funny to say that a giant lake is the driest part of Ireland?
That's, yes.
So Dublin gets great weather. Great weather. It gets less precipitation than New York City.
Okay.
So you don't instantly think that New York is wet, and therefore you should not think that Dublin is wet. And if you are worried about the weather, driest month in Ireland is actually April.
Oh.
So you're more likely to get dry weather in April than you are in August and July.
Mm-hmm.
Also, because of that, it's not in summer. So if you don't have the kids, a great time to come over April is. And then, the winters are very mild. So we rarely get snow because we're so close to the Atlantic. That keeps us cool and temperate, and it also means that we don't get the residual heat from the European continent during summer. So at the height of summer, it's always going to be more comfortable in Dublin than it would be in London in
Mm,
early August, you know?
fantastic. Yeah.
And maybe that's why you moved up to Yorkshire, huh?
Absolutely. Absolutely for the weather. And the beautiful people. That's it. That's it.
Yeah.
I'm sure you'll know on the greatest Star Trek series is Star Trek Voyager, and the latest series, their escape is on the holodeck. They go to Ireland, and that becomes one of their permanent features of the series.
Wait, they escape and they choose Ireland? I don't
Yeah, yeah. So if
understand.
you want to relax, a bit of escapism on a Star Trek ship, you have the holodeck, and one of the
Right.
characters creates a holographic version of Ireland, the west coast of Ireland, which, in no way looks like a backlot in California, just so you know.
Ah, yeah, that's right. Yeah, yeah. Need to
But yeah,
make it up the green and then you've got it. It's funny, my wife's a huge fan of Star Trek, and she shared a clip, so a snippet from one episode for me and sent it to me, and it's the that just shows you my Star Trek knowledge. It's the android. What's his name?
data.
Thank you, Data. Who says my name is Garvin?
Oh,
So this
really?
blew my mind because nobody's called Garvin. Garvin is, an Irish name. There's a few of us in Ireland. It's even a rare name in Ireland. So to have not only an American, but a computer American, if we could call him that,
Hmm.
say the name was quite a shock for me.
Oh, wow. No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I'll see if I can find it and send it to you.
Fantastic. Well, I believe I've talked to you about all the questions I had, which was first and foremost Paddington and the Riddle of the Sands, and how interesting that the author, he must already have been known to Churchill. Churchill was influenced by his spy novel,
Hmm.
so must already have known this guy when he walked in to the negotiation table.
Well, you probably know this. Churchill spent a good deal of his youth, or at least some of his youth, I should say, in Ireland. So he visited several summers. And, one of the quotes was, God invented whiskey to stop the Irish taking over the world. Which, you could dissect that in a few different ways.
Yes.
But I believe he could understand and recognize the innate intelligence in at least some Irish people. And if I could mix it with an Irish proverb, which is first the man takes the drink and then the drink takes the man.
Mm,
And thankfully, in Ireland, those are less burdens today.
yeah.
We have more things to entertain ourselves, and there's I won't say there's teetotalers, but because in the back in the day, it was you either drink beer or you drank tea, but now you can
Mm.
have the non-alcoholic beer. And I'm sorry to flaunt Guinness, but Guinness is zero. Its non-alcoholic beer is the best non-alcoholic beer I've tasted.
Okay.
It's actually surprising. You'd be drinking it and it's like, I have to drive. Are you sure this is the non-alcoholic one? Because the taste is so similar. So, and then,
Yeah.
you can still drink quotation marks and yet not drink.
Yeah, I do have one question there though, which is that why has Guinness become like so associated with, Irish culture?
So it goes back to particularly the 1860s. So obviously, Guinness started in 1759, and then eventually, when they started making stout, well, they made it rather early, but the Guinness recipe that we call Guinness today, because Guinness made
Mm.
red ales, they made different types of beers. That stout recipe is from 1825, 1826, thereabouts. And it was very successful. And of course, back then and still today, they sell more stout and porter in England than all the English stouts and porters combined. And so, with that success, in England, the difficult policies that English regulation was forcing on Irish businesses, there was a good bit of tariff wars, shall we
Mm.
call them? You know, it seems like it would be a blast from the past talking about tariffs. But there was protectionism involved there. And so a lot of Irish goods were not able to get into England, or if they were, they had to be produced at a lower quality in order to suffer the tax and the tariffs
Mm.
to end up on the shelf and still be equitable in terms of the price. And so they were poorer quality, right? In the 1800s than they had been in, let's say, the 1600s. So Guinness, partly as a patriotic gesture, threw the harp on its glass,
Mm.
on its branding, to remind people in England Guinness is Irish and it's a good, solid product. And maybe you'll think of buying other Irish products because they're not
Okay.
all rubbish, you know? So that's at least partly what the reasoning was for denoting its Irishness with the stamp of the harp. And then there is the peculiarity of the Guinness pint itself, which, as we know in its current form, was started in 1959. And by that, I mean that that's when they added nitrogen oxide to
Mm.
the pint to give it that lovely creamy head as opposed to a bigger, bubbly lager head, if that makes sense to
Mhm.
listeners. And so that adds a complication and a bit of complexity rather to how it's poured because you're not only dealing with the liquid and the carbon dioxide now, but you've got a third element of nitrogen oxide. And so the pubs in Ireland obviously would be au fait with how to set that up, how to maintain it, how to pour the pint, whereas elsewhere in the world, they wouldn't be that familiar. They're like, what's going on with this beer? Why beer? Why is it being weird here? Why do I have to pour it in two parts and all that
Mm.
jazz? But Guinness have taken a lot of steps to try to mitigate the difference in taste and what would I say, excellence in terms of what the pint looks like and what it tastes like, so that around the world it tastes a bit better. But the true Guinness drinkers of old will still say that you can't drink Guinness outside of Ireland.
Okay.
Right. Now, if you're not familiar with the tastes, it's going to taste the same.
Mm.
You know, it's like anything, right? It's like Americans coming over to, you know, Ireland or England or Scotland, and they hear accents, but they just hear one accent, an
Yeah.
Irish accent or a Scottish accent. They're not able to tell the difference between the different accents yet. So for most people, your Guinness will be fine, but it will taste better here.
Okay.
And some would argue that that's in your head, but I'm a firm believer that it does taste better and different in Dublin or anywhere in Ireland. But
Brilliant.
don't just stick to the Guinness. Just if you're coming to Dublin and you're in the pub, ask the bartender for something Irish, something local. Get some craft beer because they need our support. And you know, please at least buy some Irish beer if you're drinking beer.
Fair enough. Fair enough. And that sounds a good tip for people visiting. And of course, the most important thing people can do when they visit Ireland is message you. So I believe you can be found at DublinTourGuide.ie.
That's right. Yeah, DublinTourGuide.ie. You can see the selection of tours that we do there. They're all private, so we can meet you at your hotel and spend however long you want there. You can check out the tours yourselves. And we do tours that go outside of Dublin as well. But it's all on the website there, and we're available all year round.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks very much, Thomas.